Hello and welcome. This unit introduces project management, and we'll spend this and the next couple of units exploring it. In this unit, we'll talk about some fundamentals, including how organizations like libraries, archives, and museums have adapted mainstream project management methodologies to the kinds of activities these organizations typically undertake. Next time, we'll talk about some of the newer development methods such as Agile and Scrum, and how they can be used to manage digital projects. Finally, we'll look at some of the tools you can use to estimate, plan, and control projects, digital and otherwise. According to the Project Management Institute, a project is a temporary endeavor undertaken to create a unique product, service, or result. It has a defined beginning and end in time, and therefore a defined scope and resources. In most cases, projects are accomplished by teams of people assembled for the project, who don't usually work together, sometimes from different organizations. So, project management is the application of knowledge, skills, tools, and techniques to project activities to meet the project requirements. If you think back to our discussion of strategic planning, there are two kinds of tactics used to execute strategic objectives: the ongoing programs of the business, which for libraries are things like circulation, reference, interlibrary loans, and so on. And you can also name for yourself the equivalents for archives and museums and other information organizations. And the projects that serve to expand, improve, or introduce new services, products, and processes. And while project management involves making more or less detailed plans for executing projects, good project management requires good strategic thinking, because projects rarely ever go entirely as planned. The best-known project management methodology is arguably the Project Management Institute's PMBOK, or Project Management Body of Knowledge. I have a relatively short video I'm assigning from a PMBOK trainer that will explain this, much of it in reasonably good detail, so I'm not going to repeat that lecture here. But if you are going to sit down yourself and come up with an approach to pulling off a project, you'd probably come close to at least the 5 processes listed here as a first pass. That is, initiating, planning, executing, monitoring and controlling, and closing. In fact, this should sound familiar. Remember POSDOC, plan, organize, staff, direct, and control? The project knowledge areas also will make sense if you think about them, and you'll see in the case study readings how many of them are addressed in context. In addition, the PMBOK has some 47 or so processes, depending on the version, layered onto these that specify what to do at what step for each process. And it also describes over 100 tools and techniques that can be used to implement the processes. Studying this and taking some courses and passing an exam and doing some applied field work can lead to several different levels of project and program certifications, including specializations such as risk management. The best known alternative to PMBOK is probably PRINCE2. PRINCE stands for Projects in Controlled Environments, and it's used primarily in the UK as best I can tell. As you can see, there is overlap in process groups, and there are similarities in activities and knowledge areas as well, although I don't want to risk oversimplification. There's an article linked in your supplementary readings that goes into the differences in more depth if you're interested. For now, I'm primarily interested in making sure you have a good overview of the PMBOK structure and its adaptation in projects of various sizes and complexities. The main problem with PMBOK is scale. PMBOK writ large is good for space shots and building bridges. You probably don't need all 47 processes and a certified project manager just for putting up a new digital collection or migrating to a new ILS version. But if you don't have a project plan and a knowledgeable project leader, and by knowledgeable I mean not just about the technology, but about project planning and management, your project stands a good chance of running into problems. I've included, to start, a few articles, some required and some supplementary, on managing smaller projects. Pay attention, especially to the 3 short articles by Cervone. You will use these in upcoming assignments and in your final project. I'll let the required articles speak for themselves, and they're not long. First, according to Larson, you need to recognize when a project really is a project, and you need to do an amount of planning appropriate to the project. Then, you need to commit to following the plan once you make it, and you need to commit to controlling and tracking the plan once you get it going. It's easy enough to scale down the PMBOK's 5 processes into a manageable project plan. The plan should be a written one, signed off by upper management. It's important to understand these principles because you'll put them to use later when you get to your final group plan. Because you'll put them to use later when you get to your final group project. According to Cervone, the project plan is the document that defines and clarifies the scope and purpose of a project. That doesn't mean you blindly follow the plan, because things always come up. But nevertheless, the project plan is essential because it puts everyone on the same page and clarifies for everyone the goals and objectives of the project. There are different approaches to creating a plan, and it depends partly on the methodologies and approaches you'll use. If you'll be using agile methods, for example, which we'll talk about more in the next unit, you'll specify fewer initial details than traditional details. But all project plans need to address at least the items listed here, including purpose, goals, and objectives, scope and risk assessment, project products and deliverables, assumptions and constraints that will affect the project methodology, and management. Creating the project plan, according to Cervone, is a project in itself. And in fact, the 3 short articles covering these steps will serve as a pretty good outline of your final team project for this course. The first CHAOS report was produced by the Standish Group in 1994, and they've repeated the survey of the scope of software project success and failures, the major factors that contribute to project success or failure, and the key ingredients that can reduce project failures. And they've done this report annually. It's an industry group, so the complete figures always aren't reported publicly. But an anniversary edition was released in 2014, and in spite of supposed improvements in software design techniques, project management methodologies, and corporate oversight, the numbers really haven't changed much. From the original report, companies in the United States spent more than $250 billion each year on IT application development of approximately 175,000 projects. The average cost of a development project for a large company was $2.3 million, for a medium company was $1.3 million, and for a small company it was $434,000. Of the projects that enjoyed relative success, this slide lists some of the factors contributing to project success, but of course many projects fail. This slide lists factors contributing to project failure. You can see that the top 5 or 6 answers all relate to failures in the project planning process. Now, I'm sure that all of the major companies had qualified project managers on board, turned in project plans, but it's also nevertheless true that plans failed because of lack of user involvement, bad alignment with strategic goals and objectives, poor articulation of requirements, planning insufficient to project scale, and unrealistic expectations. I've put the chaos report links into the supplementary reading session, but if you have time, I'd recommend giving them at least a skim. Mostly they're charts and graphs that will give you some good background. Briefly, the numbers are pretty bad. Estimates are that for the period covered in the original report, American companies and government agencies spent $81 billion for canceled software projects. These same organizations paid an additional $59 billion for software projects that were completed but exceeded their original time estimates. Risk is always a factor when pushing the technology envelope, but many of these projects were as mundane as a driver's license database, a new accounting package, or an order entry system. On the success side, the average was only 16.2% for software projects that were completed on time and on budget. In the larger companies, the news was even worse. Only 9% of their projects came in on time and on budget. And even when these projects were completed, many were no more than a mere shadow of their original specification requirements. Projects completed by the largest American companies had only approximately 42% of the originally proposed features and functions. Some tips from Frank Cervone's supplemental article on managing digital library projects address some specific issues that come up with technology projects in general that don't always arise in other contexts. First, it's especially easy with technology projects to try to micromanage and control, especially when the manager is also the lead technologist. The project leader should lead the project, let the team do their work. Second, and almost always in contradistinction to the first, don't be disengaged. Make sure you understand the team dynamics and listen to their concerns. Third, don't be a shill. This means perhaps being a cheerleader for a particular vendor or certain technology or ideological point of view, such as open source versus vendor software. You have to keep an open mind. Think about all the factors and the best solutions for the organizations. Fourth, don't geek out. You need to keep up and avoid being perceived as clueless, but you also need to avoid jargon and techno-speak when communicating outside the team and with your non-technical team members from outside the digital library project. Your role as a team leader is not to be the bit twiddler. You are the communicator. Fifth, don't expect overnight success. Realize the rate at which people move and adapt, and that technological change is difficult for many people. In part, this is part of your role as a communicator, and see 4 above. Sixth, don't fall prey to resourcification. Resourcification is when all professionals are valid equally regardless of their talent or lack thereof. This doesn't mean don't treat people unfairly, but realize everyone has unique talents as well as faults, and realize that you can't have people on the team in positions they cannot adequately fill simply to solve a resource problem. Staff appropriately, which is not necessarily equally. Seventh, don't put the needs of the team above the needs of the library. Most digital library projects are for the ultimate use of the patrons, not the staff. Consider who the system is being built for. The staff will have opinions about convenience and preferences that may not always be in the best interests of the patrons. This is a tough line to walk. Eighth, don't pass off collaboration as a way of avoiding being decisive. Libraries value collaboration, but when push comes to shove, effective leaders will gather information from trusted advisors and will then take responsibility for making executive decisions. So, there are difficulties that arise with managing technology projects that don't always arise with other kinds of projects. Being aware of some of these and being proactive about heading them off can make managing them easier and more effective. Let let me briefly call your attention to Rutledge and Sproul's article on the changing role of system librarians. In looking for resources for this course, this is the most recent article I've been able to find on knowledge and skills requirements, pulled from an analysis of job postings for technical library positions. This was published in 2017. The data is 2014, so this is old now. But these surveys are actually rarely run, and I think these general figures still hold water. The main takeaway here is a very high number of job postings for technical positions in libraries that are requiring either knowledge of or experience with project management methods. So in addition to learning as much as you can about it in this course, if you haven't already arranged your capstone internship, you might want to think about setting one up in a position where you would be working on a project with a plan in place. That way, you would gain experience you could use on a resume. A couple of interesting things to note in this survey are nearly 80% of jobs analyzed require the ALA-MLS, with fewer alternate options such as computer science degree are accepted than in previous surveys. And there's an increased emphasis on collaboration and teams. Technology librarians are frequently the ones tapped to lead newer project-based tasks. A key conclusion is, today's technology-oriented librarians need to develop a variety of specialized skills in many different areas, including, but not limited to, web technologies, server, desktop, and mobile computing technologies, digital collections, data analysis, project management, and scholarly communications. Also, employers now seek job candidates with interpersonal and communication skills as well as technology skills. And this is especially interesting. Students should no longer accept that a graduate degree in library or information science is enough to gain entry into the profession. They should seek to identify as early as possible what specific area or areas of the profession interest them, and then endeavor to gain as much practical experience in those areas as possible. So this is a supplementary reading, but give it here at least a skim if you're so inclined. It's not that long. The Serrano reading confirms that many librarians, system and otherwise, do in fact end up working on projects. In fact, around 1/3 of those polled had participated in 3 to 8 projects in the last 5 years, with 83% saying they had participated as project members and 46% as project managers. No particular project methodology stood out, but PMBOK was the most commonly used, along with Scrum and Prince2. If project management and LIS education interests you, I'd recommend this article. Project management for digital initiatives presents some unique challenges, limited budgets and resources being chief among them. I've added 2 readings to the required list that are both very recent and that directly address project management strategies for digital initiatives, including one that focuses on interdisciplinary collaboration, which is increasingly common for libraries, such as projects involving digital humanities, teaching, and library outreach. I won't dissect them here, but we'll leave the analysis for you and discussion. So that'll wrap it up for this session, and I look forward to reading your assignments and discussion. Thanks for watching.